Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to replace an inner and outer tie rod end on a 2019 and up Chevy Silverado. You're going to need a few tools to do the job. You're going to need a grease gun. I like to have an impact. I've got a 22mm socket or a 22mm wrench, a set of needle nose pliers, a Zerk fitting or grease nipple, your new inner and outer tie rod end, some assorted different wrenches, a set of flathead screwdrivers, a hammer, inner tie rod kit, or a large wrench. You're probably going to need some heat and something to put some odds and ends into as you go. Let's jump into it. First thing we're going to do is to take our impact with the 22mm socket or use a wrench to remove the nut from the outer tie rod end. Once removed, hammer the bottom of the tie rod end until it pops free. Now use a 15/16 wrench with a 5/8 wrench to loosen the nut on the shaft of the inner tie rod. After about 80,000 miles, mine was rusted solid, but nothing a little heat couldn't fix. So now when we are taking this off, we want to make sure that we count the number of spins so that when we put this back on, it's relatively in the same position as it was before. Obviously, we are going to need to get a professional alignment done on the front end after doing this install, but this is going to get you okay until you get to the store to actually get that done. So I'm going to go ahead and count it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 23 spins. When I put the new one on, I'm going to do 23 spins. Now we can finish removing the nut on the shaft of the inner tie rod in preparation of removing the boot from the inner tie rod. Once done, we can remove the clip on the boot with some pliers or your fingers before moving on to removing the clamp from the back of the boot. You're basically going in and then turning the screwdriver so that you're going to pop this open. These clamps are a one-time use, so don't worry about wrecking them. With the clamps removed, go ahead and remove the boot from the inner tie rod. And so you can really see how loose this thing is. Like, I can turn it, I can spin it, I can move it all around. It just drops right down. And then when you compare it to the new one, which I'll show you in a second, like this would be sticking straight out and wouldn't just fall down like that. So this definitely needs to be replaced. So this is where you would use a tie rod end kit, where they come with a nice big socket on the end. You can throw this in there and then you can get this on the tie rod, and then you can put a ratchet attached to it and then actually spin this off. Unfortunately, all of these are a little bit too small for mine. It needs to be about 1.5 inches. So I've got this big crescent wrench that I'll lop on from the bottom and be able to spin it off that way. If you don't have a large enough wrench or crescent wrench, a pipe wrench can do the job just as good. Okay, I got it off. Might not have been able to see that very well as I hit the camera as I spun it off. But once loose, you can spin the inner tie rod off the threads by hand. So before we go ahead and install this new one, we're going to take this boot off. But in order to do so, you need to loosen this and then take the outer tie rod end off. So let's go ahead and take the tie rod end off. Now that we have the tie rod end off, we can take this nut off, set that aside. Take this little fitting off, you just push it in with your fingers, pulls off, and then we can take this boot off. So now we have our inner tie rod end all nice and clear. What we need to do though is we need to insert that Zerk fitting or the grease nipple into this little slot here, otherwise you're just going to get dirt and debris and then the grease is going to be able to squeeze out of there. Now that we have that grease nipple installed, just put a little tiny bit of grease in here. They already are pre-greased, so you don't really need that much, but I do like to just top it up. Before installing the inner tie rod, use some blue medium strength Loctite on the threads. Once the inner tie rod is threaded on by hand, make sure you torque it to 89 foot-pounds of torque. And now look how much tighter this is, right? Like this is just staying up on its own, requires a decent amount of force to move this thing around versus the other one was just flopping all over the place. So that's what you want it to look like. It's now time to reinstall the boot over the inner tie rod. First, loosen the clamp on the inside of the boot and then add some grease to the boot on both ends. Then we can slide the boot back on and ensure it is properly seated into place. Then tighten the clamp on the back side of the boot with a flathead screwdriver and then place the clamp on the outside of the boot with your fingers. Now reinstall the jam nut. So now we're ready to install the outer tie rod end. So what did we count to? 23. So we're going to do 23 spins. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23. And I want to make this very clear that these are aftermarkets and this is probably different than the original tie rod ends. So it's really crucial that you go and get a professional alignment done as soon as you possibly can after doing this install, because you will have this vehicle out of alignment right now, which can cause wear and tear and other problems with your front end. Tighten the jam nut to 50 foot-pounds of torque and then add the nut to the outer tie rod end and tighten to 25 foot-pounds of torque, followed by an additional 90-degree turn. So one thing to note for you guys, that obviously this thing is a lot larger and a lot stronger, but I do find it is slightly rubbing up against the dust cover, which is then in turn pushing on the rotor. It does say that this is meant for this vehicle, so the link in the description will be down below where you can get this specific outer and inner tie rod end, but just to be aware that it does slightly press up against the dust cover. And last but not least, make sure you guys grease up this nipple here. Unfortunately, I am completely out of grease, so we'll be doing that later tonight. But I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, take care.